Ladies and gentlemen, the Brit Pack is back. This is episode number 38 of the MMA Podcast that brings you fighting talk with a distinctly British flavour. My name is Simon Head, and joining me via the wonders of Skype is Mr. Chamakar Sandhu. How are you, buddy?
Feeling refreshed, re-energized. It's been a nice little break with no big UFC action, and we've got a belter of a card coming up this Saturday night with UFC 211, and Saturday just can't come fast enough for me.
It's weird. Normally when you get a bit of a run-up leading into a card, you get the build-up, and by the time fight night arrives, everyone's going absolutely crazy for it. That buzz is only just beginning to kick in. It feels to me like the card is still kind of flying under the radar, which, if you look at the fight card, is absolutely ridiculous. It's going to be one hell of a fight card. There's good fights on the prelims on Fight Pass. There's very good fights on the prelims on FX, and the main card is absolute top of the milk stuff, as the legendary darts commentator Sid Waddell would have said back in the day. Absolutely top draw MMA from start to finish. It's going to be some night. So that's what we're going to do this week on episode number 38. We're going to go through UFC 211, through that fight card, pick out some of the stories, some of the fights that we're particularly looking forward to, maybe share a little prediction or two, you never know. Then we'll get into your questions and we'll answer your questions, and we will try and wrap this thing up in something approximating an hour. We will see how that goes. That normally means you're going to be here for at least 2, but we'll see how it goes. So Sandhu, how do we want to do this? Do you want to work bottom to top, or do you want to work top to bottom? How do we want to do this?
Well, to be fair, I'm looking at the card right now, and aside from perhaps Jessica Aguilar versus Courtney Casey, the preliminary card is pretty much full of unknowns, fighters without Wikipedia pages, and to be honest with you, fighters that do belong at that portion and that end of the card.
Yeah.
The Fight Pass only prelims. But I think we should just focus on the televised prelims, which will be kind of like the FX portion in the US, the BT Sports stream for us, and then also UFC Fight Pass, and then just head on straight into that chock-a-block 5-fight main card.
Okay, so the prelim card, Sandhu, is actually on FX this week, which is a little bit different. It's normally on Fox Sports. You've got theories to why that is. I'm not 100% sure myself, but it is normally a Fox Sports 1 or Fox Sports 2. This week, it's on FX in the States.
Yeah, I've got a sneaky suspicion that it might be to do with the NBA playoffs. Those always draw massive ratings for the major broadcasters stateside. It's the big sweepstakes, It's the crunch end, the business end of the season. It's like Sky Sports or BT Sport trying to get as many end of the season Premier League games for the top 2 or 3 teams that are vying for the Premiership or something like that. Every game matters. Everyone's tuning in. So I've got a little bit of a suspicious feeling that might be it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, we got 4 fights on that prelim card, and I've got to say that makes a tidy little fight card of its own. To be honest, if you had a sort of a medium to low level fight night show and you put those 4 fights on it, especially the featured prelim, which we'll get to in a few minutes, I think people will be quite happy. The first one is Marco Polo Reyes versus James Vick. Now, I was in the arena in the Forum in Inglewood, California at UFC 199, where Marco Polo Reyes and Dong Hyun Kim, the other Dong Hyun Kim, as we like to call him, the lightweight version, they borderline stole the show at UFC 199. One of the sleeper contenders for Fight of the Year in 2016. Amazing performance. That fight had everything except for head movement, Sandhu. It was great fun. Everyone who was in the arena early absolutely loved that fight. Great performance from both the guys. And Polo Reyes has gone on from that, and he's got himself a sizable test in the form of James Vick, who is a local lad. It's a tough one to see Reyes getting the win here. Vick on home soil. It's hard to back against him, Sandhu.
Yeah, Marco Polo Reyes last summer, Inglewood, up to no good. He was up to no good that night. He got the job done. But yeah, I mean, James Vick, the backstory here is this event's held in Dallas, Texas, and he's a proud Texas native, as is our good friend John Morgan, and he really wanted to get on this card, and he got his wish. And I'm always kind of curious to see how fighters react to the opportunity to fight in their home country or their home state or their hometown. I get it. You've got the opportunity to have your friends and family and fans come and see you live and in action instead of watching it on TV. Easy access for them. But how do the fighters react? Do fighters kind of use that as some adrenaline and get them through the fight, give them an extra 10%, or perhaps does the occasion overwhelm them? I've got a feeling, just from a stylistic point of view, first of all, like you mentioned, I think the boxing, the range, the reach advantage that James Vick's going to have in this fight, I think will be enough to get the job done. And if that isn't enough to get the job done, I think just that home crowd environment will be the proverbial 12th man on the pitch for him, and kind of egg him on to get the job done. Yeah,
I think Polo Reyes will make him fight. There is no doubt about that. He will stand toe to toe with him and throw leather. Vick is a big, rangy lightweight. He must be one of the tallest lightweights on the UFC roster, I would have thought. And in terms of his reach, he must be right up there for having one of the longest reaches. He's got a 10-1 record. He got knocked out, actually on the same card that we were talking about just now, UFC 199. He got sparked out by Beneil Dariush. Absolutely crushed with a huge punch by Beneil Dariush in that. That was one of the knockouts of the year from Beneil Dariush in that. But that was his only career defeat. And he's beaten some solid opposition. He's got wins. He's got a submission over Ramsey Nijem, who's a solid competitor in the Ultimate Fighter. He's back in the Ultimate Fighter house right now. You wouldn't know that because you're not watching it, are you, Sandhu? Tough. You're not really.
I'm not, mate. I'm watching. I'll watch the highlights on social media between TJ and Cody, and aside from that, I'm all out.
I'll tell you, you're missing out. It's good fun so far. But Ramsey Nijem, who hasn't fought on this season yet, is in the house. He went through a previous season of the Ultimate Fighter, got himself into the UFC. He got subbed by James Vick. Nick Hine, who we know very well on this show, friend of the show, Nick Hine, he lost out as well to James Vick via decision. Jake Matthews, considered one of the hot up and coming prospects out of Australia. Vick subbed him in a round, and he's, after losing to Beneil Dariush at 199, he came back and beat Abel Trujillo with a third round submission. He's solid, I'll tell you, and I think he's one of these fighters who we haven't seen the best of him. I think he's capable of really making a run in this lightweight division, and if he should be dealing with someone like Marco Polo Reyes, but he has this kind of languid fight style. Reyes is going to be right in his face. If he gets that one done, expect bigger and better opposition for the Texecutioner, James Vick. Now, the next fight, Sandhu, I'm really, really looking forward to this. Middleweight contest between two guys who right now are flying under the radar at 185 pounds for two very different reasons. You've got Krzysztof Jotko, who is a very, very tricky Polish fighter. Very, very awkward style, up on his toes, moves around, very unorthodox, but gets the job done. Against Dave Branch, who's been in the UFC before, has gone away and has become a two-weight world champion in the World Series of Fighting. Now he's back in the UFC. He wants to make a run in the UFC's 185-pound division. This is his coming out party on his return to the UFC. Arguably, he couldn't have faced a trickier opponent to prepare for. This is going to be a fascinating contest.
Yeah, this is decent matchmaking by the UFC because, like you said, David Branch, he went away from the UFC, made a name for himself for the World Series of Fighting, became a two-weight champion, and he's come back and he's going to fight Krzysztof Jotko. And I think this will be a good litmus test just to see where he's at. But I want to talk about Krzysztof Jotko for a second because he has been a gypsy for the UFC. Check out the locations of his last 5 fights, which he has won all, by the way. Stockholm, Sweden, Dublin, Ireland, London, England, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. So this is going to be his very first fight in the United States, and he has been globetrotting, to say the least.
Well, I mean, you can even go back earlier than that. He fought in his first fight in the UFC was in Brisbane. Then he went to Berlin, and then he embarked on the run that you've just said. So he's never fought in the same place twice. I don't know whether many of our listeners remember The Littlest Hobo, which was a children's TV program about a dog. And he is the littlest hobo of the UFC. Everywhere he goes, wherever he lays his hat, that's his home. And wherever the UFC pitches their octagon, Krzysztof Jotko will pitch up and throw down. He specialises in decisions. He got one big knockout win over Tamdan McCrory last year. Was it last year? Yeah, it was last summer. UFC Fight Night in Ontario. But really, it's been decisions all the way in the UFC for Jotko, who, as I say, is a very tricky opponent, very hard to look good against. So if Dave Branch can put him away, then that will be a real statement, I think. He's coming in. He's on a sizable winning streak. I'm just off the top of my... Oh, where are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11 fight win streak. Scanning Wikipedia there very quickly. 11 fight win streak for Dave Branch. Submissions, decisions, TKO.
But I'd argue...
TKO over Yushida Kami. That's not to be sniffed at.
I'd argue though, Simon, that although he's got the longer win streak, I think that the 5 wins that Krzysztof Jotko has got on his record are against better competition. Tor Trong, Scott Askham, Brad Scott, Tamdan McCrory, and Talas Leitis. That's a pretty decent bunch of middleweights. I mean, it's not top 10. Well, maybe Talas Leitis is. Maybe the upper end of top 10 when he probably fought him.
Near enough, yeah.
But the others are all between 10 and 20. In the UFC, Scott Askham isn't obviously anymore. But, these guys are kind of battle-tested, really tough, gritty fighters and very, very difficult to beat, which is why I'm not surprised that when he has beaten them, he's got decisions over them.
So who are you picking then, Sandhu? We've got Jotko, very tricky to deal with. He's the guy who's going to be perhaps more comfortable in the UFC, just because he's already there. He's had plenty of fights in the UFC. Well, you've got Dave Branch, who overall is a more experienced fighter, but this is his comeback fight on the big show. And he's looking to prove a point, but he's also a double world champion. So where are you going with this? Are you going with Jotko, the man in the seat, or are you going with the guy making his way in, Dave Branch?
I mean, I know that Dave Branch is probably the bigger middleweight. I mean, he's fought a lot heavyweight quite a few times. It's a tough one. It's a really tough one for me to call this one. You know what? I'm gonna assume that David Branch is the favorite. I haven't looked at the odds. I'm not really a gambler. I'm gonna assume that David Branch is the odds-on favorite to win this fight. I'm gonna go for Krzysztof Jotko here. I think that David Branch, coming back to the UFC, coming back in as a 2-weight champion, yes, he might feel like he's kind of gone away from the UFC. He's polished his game up and he's coming back, but I think that the occasion might get to him. And I think with Krzysztof Jotko, you've got someone like we just went through his record of locations. He is very well adept to fighting on foreign soil. He that's not an issue for him. It's par for the course. And I think he's going to go in there, and I think he's going to grind out another decision. That's my kind of outside kind of bet there, kind of from a distance. If I'm probably leaning 55-45 in favor of Krzysztof Jotko.
It is a tough one to pick. Harder to pick than a broken nose, as someone once told me. I'm going to go the other side of the coin. You like that one, didn't you? I'm going to go the other side of the coin with Dave Branch. I think he'll be the bigger, stronger middleweight in there. Assuming he has no problems with the weight cut, and I don't see any reason why he would. I think he comes in there with a boatload more experience. I think he'll be the bigger, stronger man in there. I think if he gets his hands on Jotko, that's going to be the real... range is always the deciding factor in these fights. Whoever controls the range has a huge advantage. And if Branch closes his distance and gets his paws on Krzysztof Jotko, I think it'll be a bad night for the poll. I'm going to go with Dave Branch. But I do think, with it only being a 3-round fight rather than a main event, he's going to have to get about his business quick. He can't afford to give away that first round to Jotko, who will look to stick and move and be elusive and slippery in that first round. So, but yeah, I'm going to go with the returning veteran Dave Branch to get that one. Now, featherweights. Two guys you could not wish for two scrappier, more entertaining featherweights to stick on the prelim card of a big pay-per-view event such as this. If you want to tee up what's coming up later, you want to give people something entertaining to watch while you're imploring them to part with their $60 to buy the pay-per-view, you want to put on a fight that's going to be a real sort of knockdown, drag-out, slobber knocker of a contest. And the fight that will do that for them is this one here. Chaz Skelly, Jason Knight. This is going to be... I think this could be fight of the night. Despite the fact we've got so many great matchups that we will talk about on this card, this one might just well steal the show in terms of fight of the night honours. Really, really looking forward to this. Skelly's in... who looks to be improving every time we see him. He looks in great form. Jason the Kid Knight, Hick Diaz, as the media have dubbed him. He's on a nice little 3-fight win streak right now. This one's going to be a cracker, Sandhu.
Yeah, and Chaz Skelly's another Texan who's got an opportunity here to fight in his home state. He's got a knack of getting some rear naked chokes. He loves getting chokes around the neck, and I don't know. I've got a sneaky suspicious feeling that Chaz Skelly might get another one here against Jason Knight. Although having said that, Jason Knight, he's coming off a rear naked choke win of his own against Alex Caceres. So and that was actually a really good fight. I enjoyed that. That was a couple of months back in January. But yeah, flip a coin, take your pick. But if I'm gonna, if you got a gun to my head, I'm gonna lean either which way. I might just lean towards Chaz Skelly here.
Yeah, I think there might be a little bit more buzz around Jason Knight, but I think you look at Skelly's record. He's only lost 2 fights, and those fights were against Musab Bektik, who he took the distance, and Darren Elkins, who he also took the distance. So he's never been finished, and the only 2 guys who have actually beaten him, one of them was by a majority decision. Bektik, not all of the judges gave the fight to Bektik. There was a draw in there. So Elkins and Bektik, if you're dropping decisions to those guys, you're not doing too bad. And everybody else, I mean, he's beaten a former Cage Warriors champion in Jim Allers. He's been in there with Maximo Blanco, and most recently he beat Chris Grutzmacher. But I think this is going to be probably the toughest fight that he's had, aside from those 2 losses. And you take a look at, Jason the Kid Knight. He's lost to Kawajiri in the UFC. That was his debut, but he's beaten Jim Allers as well. Dan Hooker, who I always enjoy watching fight, he beat him, and Alex Caceres. I'm siding with Hick Diaz here, Jason the Kid Knight. I just think he might be the guy to sort of take it up a level. But this is going to be a cracking fight. I'm really looking forward to that one. So you're going with Chaz Skelly, aren't you? You're going with Skelly for this one.
Yeah, I'm going with Skelly. So we've got a bit of a difference of opinion here on this. It is good. I don't know. We should try to figure out some way of making things interesting moving forward with some of these predictions.
Are you suggesting a wager?
Something. We need to figure something out. Maybe listeners can throw a suggestion or 2 at us and figure out what we can do with the show. Maybe we can make it into a segment.
I don't think we should listen to the listener suggestions. They'll offer up some sort of crazy forfeit, which I will inevitably have to do. So no, yeah, whatever it is, let's see what we do. Even if it's for a pint, then I think we should put something on it.
Maybe a pint and a cheeky Nando's.
A pint and a cheeky Nando's. I can stretch to that. But yeah, that's going to be a cracker. Now that is all merely the hors d'oeuvre, the starter, the appetizer, the taster ahead of the main card. However, before we go into the main card, there is one fight that really would walk onto any main card anywhere in the world except Dallas on Saturday night, by the sounds of it. Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier at 155 pounds. This is Eddie Alvarez's first fight, having lost his lightweight world championship to Conor McGregor. You might have read about it at UFC 205. And he's taking on the Diamond, Dustin Poirier, who is always one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. He's never in a bad fight, that guy. And I think just a stylistic matchup between these two, it's going to be, that will be one of the best fights of the night as well. Just from a stylistic point of view, that's one of those where you almost want to shut your laptop lid, sit back, and just watch it, because there's going to be so much going on. It's going to be such high pace, and it's such a tough fight to pick. It is such a tough fight to pick. Poirier last year was moving his way up to world championship level, and he just fell short. You know, I think he was one fight away from potentially being right in the mix, and then he lost to Michael Johnson in a fight that a lot of people, myself included, were tipping him to win, and he got knocked out in the first round. And now he's looking to rebuild his standing again. He beat Jim Miller, and now he's got the former champ. But if he'd have beaten Michael Johnson that day, he might have been in a position where perhaps he could have been fighting Eddie Alvarez. So we've now got this fight. Which way are you leaning with this, Sandhu? Because this is a tricky one.
This really is, and you got to think about Eddie Alvarez and what he must have gone through the last 6 months or so. Dropping the title to Conor McGregor, who he was so confident he was in a... listen, every fight is confident, but you and me were both there in New York. We saw the build-up. You know, I felt like he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder. Like, how dare this featherweight come up to lightweight? I've been a career lightweight. You know, you're not going to take this belt off me. I'm battle-tested. Your left hook ain't going to do nothing to me. And lo and behold, look what happened. And I felt like, from a distance, I feel like, he had a bit of egg on his face, and he's been kind of dealing with a little bit of embarrassment from losing to McGregor on that massive stage. I'm sure the paycheck didn't hurt, and I'm sure is probably why he's been able to take some time off. Not just to kind of recover from the actual knockout itself, but to kind of rebuild himself and kind of get back into the gym and start preparing for this comeback. I think he's got a fair bit to prove himself, just to make sure that people haven't forgotten about him. Because it does feel like, with all this Mayweather-McGregor talk, that New York fight card and event seemed like it was like a million miles away from where we are today. Seems like it took place a decade ago. But listen, Eddie Alvarez, when it comes to stages like this, typically does perform. Now, you mentioned, Simon, that Dustin Poirier was on a nice little win streak, and he just couldn't win the big one against Michael Johnson, and that's been my thing with Dustin Poirier his entire career. If you look back, before the Conor McGregor loss, he was on a nice little win streak. Before that, he had a nice opportunity at the time to fight Cub Swanson, lost that one as well. And before that, it was Chan Sung Young. And, it's interesting because he's got wins on his record against the likes of Max Holloway, the current featherweight interim champion. He's got wins against Joseph Duffy, Bobby Green. On his night, he can do the business. He really, really can. But I've just got a feeling that we're building back up to another big one now. And I just don't see him getting this one done. I can't give you a technical analysis as to why. I just feel like you see some fighters, Simon, and something tells you, what, they'll win most of their fights, but when they get that big opportunity, when they get the opportunity or the chance to perhaps get into title contendership, they're not going to make it. And that's always been my feeling with Dustin Poirier. So based on that, and the fact that Eddie Alvarez is used to a big stage like this, used to fighting on pay-per-view, even though technically he's not on the pay-per-view portion of this particular card, I'm just leaning towards Eddie Alvarez here.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Like, I almost want to back Dustin Poirier in this, because I think he's got the talent to be a world championship contender. I really do believe that. I just think there's something in his psyche that he can't get rid of. I remember after the Michael Johnson fight and heading into the Jim Miller fight, throughout fight week, he was telling everybody who would listen ahead of UFC 208 in Brooklyn, I'm a changed man. I'm gonna fight smart now. I'm not going to get involved in these tear-ups anymore, because that's sometimes they go well for me, sometimes they don't go well for me. And, I've got more skills than that. I'm going to fight a bit more smart. And he went in there with Jim Miller, and that lasted about 40 seconds. And then he ended up in a slugfest again. And, everyone had a bit of a laugh and a joke. And I think he had a bit of a laugh and joke about it afterwards. He won the majority decision, got fight of the night bonus. But there is this switch. And you can almost see it in a fight with Poirier. Something happens, the red mist descends, and then it's berserker mode, and he just goes for it. And against the very best guys, that's a bad thing to do. And Eddie Alvarez has walked through the fire many a time. I can see this one degenerating into a bit of a back and forth slugfest as well. And when then when you get to that stage, you ask yourself, who's got the better punch resistance? Who takes a shot better? Who is more likely to keep their head and maybe mix things up a bit? And I think that would be Eddie Alvarez, unless McGregor has done something to Alvarez's chin and has left him sort of a little bit more suspect in chin department. I think Alvarez will have enough savvy when the punches are flying to be able to switch things up and get a few fight winning takedowns, mix things up and get the win. But that is going to be a barn burner. That's just the preview, Sandhu. That's just the four fights that are all going to be, I think, very, very entertaining. And whether they bring finishes or whether they all go the distance, I don't think we're going to be that disappointed with any of them. I think they're all going to deliver. But let's talk about the main card, shall we? Flyweights. Henry Cejudo versus Sergio Pettis. We've got this perennial problem of what do we do in the flyweight division in the UFC. Well, here's what I think we need to do. We need to bet without Demetrius Johnson at this point and say, okay, who's the next best guy in the flyweight division? And right now, these two guys are jockeying for position to be considered, the number one contender. Pettis, I think, has got a little bit more work to do. He's got a bit more proving to do. And I guess this is the acid test for him. If he can beat Henry Cejudo, then he really has leapt himself right up there into contention. And that would be good for the UFC because that would be a new name to get in there with Demetrius Johnson as the year progresses. Henry Cejudo, Olympic gold medalist, we know all about him. Heavy hands and obviously excellent wrestling. Is this going to be Cejudo's win, or are we going to see another Pettis propel himself into championship contention? What do you think?
I'm really not sure, Simon. And this is another interesting fight because it's funny to even contemplate this, but Cejudo is facing 3 back-to-back losses if he doesn't get the job done on Saturday night. How amazing, crazy is that to think? Yeah, he lost a title fight against DJ. He lost his comeback fight against Benavidez. And now he's got himself into another pay-per-view slot. I mean, I get why they've put him on the pay-per-view. I get why they've got him on the card. You're in Dallas, Texas. He's going to bring in that Mexican crowd, and they're going to buy tickets, and I get it. So it's a good bit of matchmaking and placement for ticket sales. But you've got him in a situation where he's fighting Sergio Pettis, who's streaking, and he's on form right now. And although personally, I would like to see Ray Borg fight Brandon Moreno for a number one title contendership, get the next title shot against Demetrius Johnson. You can make a case that if Sergio Pettis beats Henry Cejudo on Saturday night, that'll be 4 wins in a row, and it's a fresh face and a fresh name, someone that Demetrius Johnson, hasn't fought before. And, if Pettis beats Cejudo and then cuts a promo on the mic, job done. I think you might be able to sneak in there, with perhaps Borg and Moreno being matched up later on in the year, perhaps to get a shot maybe in the first half of 2017, something of that ilk. So that's what I think could happen. I mean, it's still a tough fight, though. I mean, it's so hard, to kind of definitively kind of say, I think Sergio Pettis is going to win because, like you said, Cejudo is such an amazing grappler / wrestler with his background. And we've seen in the past with, Sergio's older brother, Anthony Pettis, he came from this amazing taekwondo kickboxing background, and he did suffer some losses, two wrestlers in the early stage of his career. especially when he got to the UFC. So perhaps, this might be a learning curve fight for Sergio Pettis, unless he's been able to really, incorporate the grappling aspect of the game a little bit earlier and better than Big Brother. So if I'm leaning towards anyone, I think I'm going to go for the more experienced veteran athlete and competitor in Henry Cejudo. And he's got his back to the wall. So I think he's going to have to really kind of, let his hands go as well a little bit and prove something and make a bit of a statement. But I'm just leaning towards Henry Cejudo. I'm talking, again, 55-45 in favour of Henry Cejudo. What way you got this one, Si?
Chamatkar 55-45 Sandhu. Yeah, I'm going for Cejudo. I think he's the stronger man at the weight. I think he's a bit more seasoned when it comes to being able to fight on the ground and standing up. But it's interesting. Cejudo has no finishes in his UFC career, which, for a guy who, he has got decent hands, he has got pretty heavy hands for a flyweight. He hasn't actually finished anybody. They've all been decisions. So I think if he can get a finish, that would be a real statement for him and would really push him. Sergio Pettis has been stopped before by TKO. He lost to Ryan Benoit back at UFC 185, but he's won 3 straight since then. They were all by decisions as well. You look at him in the UFC. He hasn't won a fight by stoppage either. And I guess this is why some people point at the flyweights and say, we need a bit more excitement, because a lot of these fights do go the distance. I think in a fight that is likely to go the distance, I think Cejudo will have the advantage because he can mix things up with the takedowns, and I think that will be the deciding factor. I think he gets the win. He'll either TKO him on the floor and get his first stoppage, or more likely he'll grind it out. Embrace the grind, as Mike Goldberg would say, and get the win via decision. So, but that's the first fight to kick off the main card, and we'll do a lot to help position the winner as a potential title contender. The next fight is one of my favourite fights on the card, one of my favourite fights of the year so far, and a fight that I don't even know where to begin. Frankie Edgar, Yair Rodriguez. Over to you, Sandhu. What a fight this is.
Well, first of all, in Frankie Edgar, you've got one of the greatest mixed martial arts fighters of all time, period, in my opinion.
Totally agree with you.
And in Yair Rodriguez, you've got arguably one of the most exciting talents we've ever seen enter the sport. This is amazing matchmaking. This is also the first fight on Frankie Edgar's new contract. He signed a new long-term contract with the promotion recently. And this might potentially, if Frankie Edgar doesn't win on Saturday night, I've got a feeling this might be the last time we see him fight at featherweight for at least the foreseeable future. What Frankie Edgar's been through over the last year is he had that shot for the interim featherweight championship against Jose Aldo at UFC 200. It didn't go his way, and that was his second loss to Jose Aldo. He did bounce back, though, in New York against Jeremy Stevens. If he can put Yair Rodriguez away, you could potentially put him into a situation where he could, fight for a championship if Max Holloway wins. I don't think he's going to get a third crack at Jose Aldo.
No.
I think he's going to need a few things to go his way. But before we even talk about potential title shots and things like that, he has his hands full with Yair Rodriguez. And, I saw some stuff on social media with Rodriguez, all suited and booted, hanging out with the president, Dana White, at the big boxing event this past weekend in Las Vegas. And that was Canelo and Chavez Jr. And he says that he can, in his opinion, he could be a bigger star than Canelo in Mexico. And, Mexico's a big market for the UFC. If he can, putting it on Rodriguez, if Rodriguez can put away Frankie Edgar, I think he'll catapult himself right into title contention. And with him, It doesn't matter who wins between Max Holloway or Jose Aldo. You put him straight in. He's on this fantastic win streak. He's got all the flair and the talent, and I think it's not too soon. I remember John Jones. People thought, oh, this is maybe a little bit too soon. Look at him. I like just sometimes, when fighters are starting their career a little bit early, they're on this streak. I say you put them in and see if they can beat the world champion. Because even if they can't, they've just got learning experience. They can rebuild, and they've got time to rebuild. So this is a massive fight for both Frankie and for Yair. And if I'm going to lean towards anyone, I can't go against Yair right now. His kicking skills, his acrobatics, his athleticism in there. I think he's just going to be considering how great Frankie Edgar is in terms of his speed. I think Rodriguez is going to just be a little bit too fast for him. And with Frankie, he's great in the pocket. I think Yair is going to dance around him, and I don't think Frankie's going to get close enough to even land.
Yeah, I find this just fascinating. There are so many questions that are going to get answered in this fight. First off, is Frankie Edgar still sort of properly best of the best elite level at 145 pounds? Is Yair Rodriguez the real deal? You look at the people he's beaten, they're decent opponents, but no one remotely at the level of Frankie Edgar. This is a big, big jump for him. And there are question marks, and I still have question marks over him, rightly or wrongly. In the lead up to the BJ Penn fight, some of the things that he said in the lead up to the fight have me a little worried. I've got to be honest with you. Talking about moving his training camp around, and even then he was talking about the camp that he was with then. I think he was training with Jackson's for that one. There was no. He basically couldn't even guarantee that he'd be with them for the next fight, and I don't know. There's just something that doesn't quite sit right with me with Yair Rodriguez just yet. There seems to be a little bit of immaturity there in terms of how he's handling his career. Now, in terms of being bigger than Canelo, that's one example of it. Not a chance, right? Even the UFC would have to be the biggest sport in Mexico for him to be bigger than Canelo Alvarez, and the UFC is not bigger than boxing in Mexico. Boxing and professional football are absolutely top of the tree over there. And the UFC is looking to build, and he's the star that they can really use to help build over there. But bigger than Canelo, that's overreaching for me, because Canelo is a superstar. Now, as for the fight, I think Frankie Edgar is going to test him in ways that he's never been tested before. You look at all these guys he's fought, Edgar is going to give him the sort of movement. He's going to be darting in and out, scoring, getting out of range, mixing it up with his wrestling. Expect Edgar to use his wrestling extensively in this fight. I think that's going to be a real defining factor. If Rodriguez can stop Edgar from taking him to the mat, then we've got ourselves a contest. If he can't, Edgar steamrolls him. I really do believe that. I'm going with Edgar. I still think he has it. And I would love to see Frankie Edgar versus Max Holloway. And I think that's a fight that we might well see a bit later this year, because I have a sneaking suspicion Holloway might beat Jose Aldo. So if Yair Rodriguez beats Max Holloway, then all bets are off. He is the real deal. And I agree with you. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Frankie move back up to 155 at that point, because there really aren't any major big fights for him at featherweight. He's fought pretty much everybody at that point. So huge fight. I'm going to go with a veteran. I'm going to go with Frankie Edgar. But I'm going to be watching Yair Rodriguez very closely, because he could be the next big thing in the UFC. One more win, and I think he's pretty much there. Now, talking about the next big thing, who's going to be the next big thing in the welterweight division? Who's going to be the number one contender at 170 pounds? The man who currently sits in that position is in action on Saturday night, but he's not fighting for the title. Damian Maia, one of the most respected, one of the most respectable, and one of the classiest guys you'll ever meet in the UFC. He's back in action again, and he's taking on Jorge Masvidal in a fascinating clash of styles. Masvidal is just as seasoned as they come. He seems to have hit a real high spot in his career, and this is a fascinating contest because this is a fight that Maia is taking basically because the welterweight division, they don't know what they're going to do with it at this point, like many other divisions, so it seems. So he's not waiting around. He's taking the Masvidal fight. As for Masvidal, he's got the opportunity to completely gate crash the championship picture at 170. Where do you see this one going, Sandy? Because I see this as a coin flip. You've got this specialist, this guy who, if he gets his hands on you and you takes you to the mat, the fight is over. The fight is pretty much over. I think the only guy who was able to sort of keep him off in recent fights was Gunnar Nelson. And Gunnar Nelson's one of the best grapplers in the division as well. Masvidal has got excellent grappling. Whether he's got enough to beat Maia on the mat, I don't know. But Masvidal is good in the stand-up. He's excellent in the stand-up. One of the slickest strikers at 170. So where is your hard-earned money going on this one, Sandhu?
I think we've got a bit of a theme running here, Simon, today, because this is yet another very, very tough fight to call. It really, really is. The last time Masvidal lost by decision was at Bellator 5 back in May of 2009. Now, he's lost plenty of fights since then, but they've all been by decision, and most recently quite a few split decisions. But since he's kind of like settled in to the welterweight weight class, he's on some form. He's beat Ross Pearson wasn't at 170, the other 155. But the TKO win against Jake Ellenberger and Donald Cerrone. Actually, I want to run it back a little bit. Did Ross Pearson fight on 170 or 155 side?
Ross Pearson fought him at 170, I think. Bear with me
Was
a
it
second.
a catch?
Bear with me a second. Where was this? Sorry, when was this?
This is UFC 201.
That would have been. Do you know
I'm
what?
looking at it right now.
I think it was a 170.
It was.
I think it was a 170.
That one threw me off because
it was a short notice fight. I think Pearson stepped in short notice for that fight.
There you go. That's what it is. Okay, cool. So look, he's got 3 fights at 170 on a win streak, which is good for him. But Damian Maia, my God, this guy, he just doesn't seem to lose at the moment, and he's been wrapping everybody up like a Christmas present, and he's been getting it done with relative ease. If you look at his record, Carlos Condit, Matt Brown, Gunnar Nelson, Neil Magny, who was streaking at the time. It's unbelievable, and I think he was there once before. He had a crack at the middleweight championship when he fought Anderson Silva. That was a debacle of a fight in itself, and ever since he's been having to claw, itch, scratch his way back. He reinvented himself in the welterweight division, and he's got a few performance of the night bonuses along the way, and he's got himself into a great situation here. Now, many may argue that he should already be fighting for a title, and this fight with Masvidal shouldn't even be taking place. Now, with that being said, just last week, Tyron Woodley did post on social media that Champ Camp has started. So I'm curious to know and find out whether the UFC are actually waiting for this fight to pass and essentially grant the winner of this fight the next title shot against Tyron Woodley, or whether they've already got somebody else in mind or in play for Woodley, and the winner of this fight is just going to have to wait. What I do want to see is whoever wins this fight, get on that microphone, call out Woodley, cut a promo, and solidify your position to the masses as the rightful person who should be fighting for the welterweight championship next. Now, with that all being said, which way am I going? Shock horror, it's either 55-45, Simon.
You don't tell me.
And I don't know what it is. I'm going a little bit against form versus form here. Although Maia has got more wins versus more, I suppose, game opponents and more recognized opponents, more higher ranked opponents. there's something about Masvidal's swagger, something about his energy, something about the way he's carrying himself, which just makes me feel as though he's going to get the job done. As long as he can avoid the takedown and avoid some of the scrambles, keep it on his feet, I don't think it'll take too long for him to let go of his hands and get the job done. That's the way I think it'll be early. I think it'll be round 1 or round 2. And I do see Masvidal getting a finish via TKO against Damian Maia.
I love this show. I love doing this show. But I love this show in particular because so often when we do this, we end up doing these previews and we talk about a fight and I'll say something and you'll say, yeah, I agree with you there, Si. And you'll say something and I'll say, yeah, I agree with you there, Sandhu. I completely disagree with you again. This is good. We've got a difference of opinion. We need to write these things down after the show and keep score during fight night. And I'll be hammering you on WhatsApp whenever my picks beat yours. Because I'm going for Damian Maia. This is a guy who he's at the absolute zenith of his powers right now. His list of victims is as good as anything in that 170-pound division. Tyron Woodley's CV doesn't stack up to this. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's CV doesn't stack up to this. Robbie Lawler's CV arguably doesn't stack up to this. So Damian Maia has been in there. Do you know he hasn't been finished in 8 years?
Unbelievable.
8 years, and he's fighting in an absolute shark tank of a division. And he's not ducked fights. He's been in there with pretty much everybody. And, you know, he's either lost out on the cards or he's beaten them. I think this is the time for Damian Maia to sort of break out of the nice guy persona, because he is a genuinely nice guy, but he's also a journalist. He's a trained journalist, Damian Maia, and I think he will have seen what's been going on. He needs to win this fight. He needs to win it decisively, and I think he will. I think he'll win by submission. And then he needs to get on the microphone and say, enough's enough now. No more running, Tyron. There's no one else in a better position to take you on than me. You've started your fight camp. I'm ready for you, sunshine. International Fight Week. Let's do this. And just get the fight booked, because International Fight Week needs another big fight. Tyron Woodley's in training camp. And if he's doing a longish training camp, it kind of fits either just before or during International Fight Week. Now's the time. Now is the time. And I think this is the time where Damian Maia really, really does make a statement. He's got the trickiest, most difficult seasoned opponent to come up against, because you really could make a strong case for this going the other way, and as you just have. But and it would almost be a travesty if he lost at this point, because he's earned his shot. He shouldn't have to earn it again. It's like for any English or any soccer fans listening, the 1966 World Cup final, the only World Cup that England never won. England were winning, and they let in a goal in the last minute, and it went to extra time. And England's manager, Sir Alf Ramsey, sat his players down. They were knackered, and he said, "You've won it once. Go out and win it again." And that's exactly what Carlos Condit's got to do. He's earned his title shot. He's just got to go out and earn it again. And if he does it, then there really is no denying it. And if he does it with style points and gets a finish, then, you know, the calls for him to get a title shot will be absolutely deafening, and they'll have to give him a shot. That is a cracking fight at 170. That could main event a Fox card. It could main event a Fight Night card anywhere. It's the third fight from the top of this stellar UFC 211 card. We are into the co-main event, and there's gold being bandied around because it's world title fights from here on in. The women's strawweight belt is on the line. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Jessica Andrade. Joanna loves nothing better than to stand and throw. Jessica Andrade loves nothing better than to stand and throw. This is going to be fireworks, Sandhu. Can Joanna, who is probably the more technical striker, deal with just the sheer forward pressure and heavy hands of Andrade, who is not as slick, throws a lot of winging hooks and is likely to get caught down the middle, but when she lands, people know about it. And Jędrzejczyk got wobbled a little bit by Carolina in her last fight, Can Andrade go one step better and finish her and become the world champion?
I say this with all the respect in the world for Jessica Andrade. She's a strong, short, stocky, powerful fighter. Like you said, Simon, when she starts to throw some of those haymakers, I think those will cause problems for any fighter, especially in that kind of lower weight class. But in Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and we've been covering her since her kind of rise here in the European scene. In my opinion, she is the second best pound for pound female fighter in the world. After Chris Cyborg, look no further than Joanna Jędrzejczyk as the best female pound for pound fighter in the world. Bottom line, she's undefeated. She has not even come close to really being threatened in the UFC. I mean, I remember when she fought Claudia Gadelha the second time, and everyone thought, Claudia Gadelha was going to really give us some problems. And I remember the first Claudia Gadelha fight, when it was a 3-round fight, and I saw Gadelha really start to gasp for air and start to gas halfway through the second round. And one thing I know for a fact, and that's Joanna Jędrzejczyk's got a great gas tank. Great gas tank. That's why I personally was never really worried in that Gadelha rematch. Even though early on Gadelha caused us some problems, I knew that over the course of 25 minutes, Joanna Jędrzejczyk had a gas tank, she had the stamina, and she'd pick her off. Now, with that all being said, I think the game plan for Joanna is to do pretty much the same. She's got to look at her fights with Gadelha in this fight with Andrade. You've got to weather the early storm, which I'm sure her and her team and her coach are going to be working on here. You want to get through those first couple of rounds. You want to let the more muscular fighter in Andrade gas out a little bit, get some wear and tear, let the lactic acid build up, and then you're just going to ping, 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 and you're going to start to pick her off, and then maybe even get a late stoppage, maybe in the 4th or 5th round. I think with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she's really kind of hitting the stage of her career where she's a veteran. She's fought on the big stages. She's defended her championship. She knows what it's like to go through 5 rounds on multiple occasions now. This is going to be the first time, if I'm not mistaken, that Jessica Andrade is going to be in a 5-round fight. So it'll be interesting to see, how she handles herself if she isn't able to get an early knockout, and how she handles herself in those championship rounds, and how her body handles the championship rounds. So I'm going for Polish power, Simon. I'm not going to give you a 55-45 by any means. I'm super confident in Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And again, I say this with all the respect in the world for Jessica Andrade, but for me, Jędrzejczyk is just a cut above the rest when it comes to that division.
Yeah, it might not be 55-45 in terms of your split, but I wouldn't be surprised if the scorecards read 50-45 at the end of the fight, because I agree with you. I think Joanna is just a class apart. I think the danger comes early on, and I think Joanna will know that. She'll be fighting off the back foot, moving around, and looking to sting Jessica as she comes in, because she's going to have to enter the striking range of Jędrzejczyk. And Jędrzejczyk, her straight punches, she throws straight punches as well as anybody in the UFC. There's very little wasted movement with the way she throws her shots. Very economical, and she loads up well. And she does something that the Diaz brothers do quite well, particularly Nick Diaz. Not all of Joanna's punches are full tilt punches. They're thrown stiffly, but some of them are a lot stronger than others. And you can see when she fights, when she really loads up on her shots. And I think being able to mix and match in terms of mixing up the power, just scoring, just popping away, I think that will be important for her, because she knows how to pace herself over a 5-round fight. Claudia Gadelha gave her everything she could handle in the first 2 rounds of that fight, and she won it down the stretch in the end, did Joanna. So I think the blueprint here, go back and watch the Angela Hill fight, because Angela Hill fought Jessica Andrade and did pretty well, I thought. I thought she really did show an awful lot of holes in Andrade's game, most notably her susceptibility to straight shots and counter punches, because Hill countered and landed very well with straight shots throughout the fight. Angela doesn't seem to have that viciousness to her strikes that Joanna has. And I can see nothing other than Ioane and Jacek retaining that UFC Women's Strawweight title. And the question after that is, where does she go from there? Because she's getting close to cleaning the division out. So it's going to be interesting to see what she does next. There has been talk of a 125-pound division. There was indeed a press release about the launch of a 125-pound division and an Ultimate Fighter season that was going to actually crown a new champion, much as it did with the strawweight division. Everybody was excited about that. Everybody, even you would have watched that season of Tough, Sandhu. And then they sort of retracted it and said it was premature. That doesn't mean it won't happen, and fingers crossed it will happen. But what it does mean is that they are at least thinking behind the scenes about bringing a 125-pound division into the UFC, and that can only be a good thing. And if they do, you can bet your bottom dollar that Ioane and Jacek is going to be gunning for that belt as well. So but first she's got to deal with Jessica Andrade. You think she will? I think she will, and we'll see how that goes on Fight Night. Now, let's talk about this main event, Sandhu. I am absolute. We watch a lot of fights. I watch a fair amount of boxing matches as well. So over the course of a year, we rack up the fights in terms of the amount of different contests and matchups we see. And when you look back at the end of the year and you pick out the ones that stand out to you, the ones that really did resonate with you, I think this is going to be one of those fights, because Stipe Miocic and Junior Dos Santos turned in an absolute slobber knocker of a fight when they fought last time. It was a fantastic fight. It went all 5 rounds. It was fight of the night down there in Phoenix, Arizona. And Junior Dos Santos got the unanimous decision victory. Stipe has kicked on from then and has become the world heavyweight champion. Junior seems to have reinvented his game as well. And the last time we saw him was in Zagreb, Croatia. And I was there for that fight. And he looked like $1 million against Ben Rothwell. His boxing looked phenomenal. That was the best Junior Dos Santos I've ever seen. And now, here we go, over a year on, he's now jumping in there with Stipe. The belt's on the line, champion versus former champion. This one really is tougher to pick than a broken nose. Where is your money going, Mr. Sandhu? Because you can make a case for either man, really. This is, forget 50-45, this is 51-49, surely.
Yeah, you talk about being tough to pick than a broken nose. I think we might see a few broken noses in this one, because the last time these two went at it, you're right, they went hell for leather for 25 minutes. I like the fact that Dos Santos has actually had about a year off. Now, I know that it wasn't intentional. I know that he had, I think it was a shoulder injury or something. But just considering some of the wars that he's been in over the last 2-3 years, I don't think it would have been the worst thing in the world for his brain and his skull and everything just to kind of relax and heal and just chill out for a bit before you get back into the thick of things. It's just hard. I mean, I don't know. Miocic was, arguably, definitely one of the fighters of 2016. Some people actually had him as their fighter of the year last year. He's coming off 4 straight finishes, which is a feat in itself in the heavyweight division. He's on course to try and do what no other heavyweight has done. This will be his second UFC heavyweight defense. If he beats Dos Santos, he would have tied the record of the most successful UFC heavyweight title defenses period ever.
That's crazy.
That just shows what a hot potato that heavyweight championship has been throughout the course of its title history. I'm leaning very, very slightly, again, probably even more slightly than I have been throughout the rest of this fight card. I think you're bang on the money, mate. 51-49 for Miocic. There's something about him where he's just, actually, to be fair, they both are, where they're jovial, they're happy, they seem calm and down to earth. I think Dos Santos may have a little bit more to try and prove here, because he's had a couple of extra shots at the championship, and Miocic got it done at the first time of asking. Dos Santos was a champion, lost it, and back and forth, back and forth. I think that Miocic, having lost the first fight to Dos Santos, will be the thing that lights the fire under him more than anything else. Yes, he's defending his championship. Yes, he's headlining this card. And to be fair, when I interviewed him, a while back when he was making a little European trip, he did a pit stop in London. I asked him if he was interested in defending his title once again in Cleveland, and he was like, "Hell no!" That was the furthest thing from his mind. He felt so, and again, Simon, this goes back to what we spoke about earlier on the show about fighters who want to fight in their hometown, but when it comes down to it, sometimes the moment gets the best of them. And he said that he was absolutely petrified, and he had all the nerves in the world when he was fighting in Cleveland, Ohio last year, and he doesn't want to do that again so quickly. So I think fighting in Dallas, it's away from home. It'll be just a regular fight night for him. Aside from the fact that he's obviously fighting one of the most deadly strikers in the world in Junior Santos, but there's something about Miocic and his run at the moment. I think he's just got something going in his favor. And listen, when you look at his 4-fight win streak, it's Mark Hunt, Andrei Arlovski, Fabrizio Verdum, and Alistair Overeem.
It's not bad, is it?
That's a murderer's row of some of the best UFC heavyweights ever, period, in history. So Miocic gets a tip of the hat from me, Simon.
Yeah, it's such a close fight. And you're dead right. These are two of the nicest guys you could meet outside the cage as well. I had a chance to talk to him, to a junior in Zagreb, and told me a great story. He learnt his English by watching Family Guy and The Simpsons, and from listening to Frank Sinatra records, because it's brilliant. I just wish he'd learnt it from watching South Park. Could you imagine? Could you imagine? But no, it's absolutely lovely bloke. And Stipe, met him in New York. Went to like a media dinner with him, and that was great. We really got to know Stipe over the course of like an hour and a half. Absolutely top bloke. As for the fight, I'm siding with JDS. And this is not me deliberately being contrary because you picked Stipe. I said last year, probably on the MMA Roadshow, I said Stipe Miocic was the best heavyweight in the world. And at the time, I believed it. I just think that JDS has the game to beat Stipe. You look at JDS, Cain Velasquez was Junior's kryptonite. There's always one guy who's got your number. And Cain Velasquez had Junior Dos Santos' number, no question about it. But beyond that, Overeem caught him. And that's the only time we've seen him in serious trouble for quite some time. I just think that Junior is in the right place at the right time. I think he might recently have become a dad as well. I have to check that, but I'm pretty sure he's just recently become a dad. And if he has, then that tips the scales in his favour even more for me. Because I used to work in betting years ago, and we discovered a phenomenon called the nappy factor. I don't know if I've ever spoken to you about this. The nappy factor, and we brought up loads of examples of where sportsmen hit previously unachievable heights in their career immediately after the birth of their first kid, and it just did something. And I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's like a hormonal thing, an adrenaline thing, whatever it was. It just made them feel indestructible, and it was across a whole load of different sports. It was a remarkable thing. Maybe we'll get a bit of this. You'll probably find out Junior hasn't been a dad at all, and he'll lose by knockout. But yeah, I just have a feeling he's going to do it. I think Stipe can be hurt in fights. We've seen him hurt in fights, and he's gone through. Alistair Overeem should be the heavyweight world champion right now, in my opinion. Because Alistair had him dropped, and he went for a guillotine submission, and that was the worst possible thing he could have done. If he'd have carried on raining punches down, I think he'd have stopped him. But he didn't. He went for his guillotine, which is one of his best submission moves. But it gave Stipe time to recover. Stipe recovered, and Stipe knocked out Overeem. So, arguably, Overeem should be champ right now, but for one decision. Junior Dos Santos is probably the hardest hitter in the heavyweight division, not named Mark Hunt. So I think he can stand there. He can take a licking and keep on ticking. He'll stand in front of Miocic. I think this could go away into the fight. I have a feeling JDS might catch him. So I'm going to go with JDS to win by knockout. It's such a tough one, though. It's such a tough one.
So, if anything, we've just made our preview show very easy for our listeners to put their money down on the fighters and make their own picks and predictions. You and me couldn't be further from being on the other side of the fence for the majority of these fights. We should try and put some sort of like graphic together.
We'll put it on the blog. We'll do it on the blog. We've got this blog that we really haven't posted to that often, so we will put something up. Maybe we should do this for every event, Sandhu. What the hell? We might just as well.
Yeah, put something on the blog and just put a little graphic or an image so we can just put it on social media.
Yeah.
With our picks and predictions for the main card or something.
Let's see what we could do. But yeah, and also let's see your predictions. So many good fights, so many tough ones to pick. Tweet us your main card picks. That's probably the easy way of doing it. Just tweet us your main card picks to the Brit Pack MMA on Twitter, and let's see who does the best. And you never know, if someone comes out on top and manages to beat both of us on the Brit Pack team, then maybe we'll give you a shout out on next week's show. So tweet at the Brit Pack MMA. Give us your, is it 5 fights? 5-fight main card? 5-fight main card. Just give us the surnames, all the people you expect to win, and we'll see how we do on fight night on Saturday night. It's going to be one hell of a fight in the main event. And then you look all the way down the card. There's so much good stuff to look forward to. Very little opportunity for a pee break. So don't overload on the liquids too early in the evening. I would say, because you'll end up missing something. Great stuff. Great card. Looking forward to Saturday night. But before we leave you this week on episode 38 of the Brit Pack, we have some business to take care of. We've got some questions to answer, Sandhu.
We certainly do. We're going to get right into it. Chuck Liddell, Simon.
Chuck Liddell sent us a question.
No, he didn't. But he is the topic of our very first question, which Adam Labar says, Chuck Liddell coming out of retirement for, quote-unquote, the right fight. Does this happen? And if so, does it headline a Bellator MMA event? So, for those of you who follow Chuck Liddell on social media, you would have noticed a recent pic of him in his old, Iceman shorts, and my God, for his age, he is certainly looking the business, number one. Number two, he's not currently employed by the UFC anymore. They've, when WME IMG kind of took over, they made a lot of cuts to the roster, the backroom staff, and one of the cuts was Chuck Liddell, which, to be fair, I think he'd be one of the first to admit he wasn't really doing too much to earn that monthly paycheck anyway, to be fair. Not like Forrest Griffin, who's doing his rounds, and he's always been on the European circuit trying to help him promote the sport, and they've got him doing some bits and pieces for Fight Pass. I think that was a friendly favour from his old manager, lifelong friend, and UFC president Dana White, just getting him on the books as some sort of pension plan for his post-fight career. Now that's gone. Now, I don't know what his financial situation is like. I don't know if now that contract has been terminated, he's free to fight wherever he wants to. I have absolutely no idea. Do I want to see him fight? I think that's regardless of where he fights, where he might fight, whether it's in the UFC or against Bellator, in Bellator, and whoever the opponent would be. Do we want to see Chuck Liddell fight? Now, for me, Simon, the majority of me, of everything that I am as a fan of this sport.
Know where this is going, by the way.
Says no. I don't want to see him fight. We saw how he kind of exited the sport, and it wasn't in highlight reel fashion in his favour. It was actually the opposite way. There's a deep, dark, dirty pit of my stomach that for some reason wants to see him make that walk one more time, and it can be against you can give him some kind of favourable and friendly matchmaking, whether it's an aging off TRT Vitor Belfort. I don't know. Maybe you can just bring back Tito Ortiz one more time so you can just finish him and he can ride off into the sunset with a win. I'm not sure. I'm just being honest with my feelings. I don't want to see him fight. The purist in me, the journalist in me, the guy that cares about this sport so much, and
the human being in you.
The human being, I care for Chuck's well-being, and I don't want to, see him, suffer any more knockouts or concussions or punishment. And I genuinely mean that. But just to, maybe it's because we've seen so many fighters in this Reebok gear, and to see someone who was so iconic, Simon, someone who had no restrictions with Reebok, outfit, policy and all this, business, and was really able to make himself an icon of the sport, not only with his fighting style, but with his attire and his demeanor and his personality, his mohawk, and the whole package. There's a small part of me that would just love to see him make that walk in that kind of old school fashion one more time, to almost show the new generation of fighters that although sometimes you have these restrictions put on you, there are things that you can do to kind of, I suppose, get yourself out there, in a way. That might be with your fighting style. It might be with the way you carry yourself. I don't know. It's a throwback. It's just kind of pulls on the old heartstrings.
Yeah, this is obviously an audio podcast, but we're actually recording this. We can see each other on Skype. So while Sandhu was saying all that, I was pulling all sorts of faces at him. But I've got to be honest with you. I understand exactly where you're coming from. The human being in me, and if I was in charge, if I was placed in a position of responsibility for Chuck Liddell and whether he fought or not, there is no way in God's green earth I would put him back in the cage. No way, because look what happened the last 3 times he fought: knockout, knockout. And they got increasingly worse as they went, and that's not a good look, right? That's just not a good look. It's not good for him. Now, as someone who doesn't have to make that decision, as someone who, as a journalist, has to be able to view both sides of an argument, my opinion. Let me do this. My opinion: should he fight? Absolutely not. No way, no shape or form. Should he be stepping in the cage again? Okay, he's been knocked out brutally 3 times in a row. For his own safety, no. That's my opinion. Now, remove my opinion from the discussion for a second and look at it from both sides. Could you sell a Chuck Liddell fight with Wanderlei Silva? Hell yeah. Could you sell a Chuck Liddell fight with Ken Shamrock? Hell yeah. Could you sell a Chuck Liddell fight with Tito Ortiz? If ever there was a fight you could get Tito out of retirement for, Chuck Liddell would be the fight, I would imagine.
You forgot one, Simon.
Sorry?
Can you sell a fight with Chael Sonnen?
Yeah, you could. And that's the thing. They're the sort of fights that you're really looking at. Now, if they put the fight on TV and graced us with the ability to watch it in the UK, would I watch it? Damn right I'd watch it. I'd be absolutely glued to it. I'd also be slightly disgusted in myself for
I think we all would say,
for sort of enabling this, by almost sort of approving it by partaking in the watching of it. But there's just something sort of primal about watching fight sports sometimes, and these are heroes of ours that we watched as we were cutting our teeth watching the sport, learning about the sport. One of the first fights I ever saw was a Chuck Tito fight. So, it's, if they did Chuck Tito again, it would be a poor comparison with what we've seen in the past. But nostalgia is nostalgia sells. Retro stuff sells, and that would be a retro fight. And I think the fight has to be even. If both guys are in an even state, then I think it makes it feasible. But if he's in there with anybody who's in any kind of career shape and has been winning fights consistently, then that fight should definitely never happen. And sanctioning bodies would really need to look at things like this very closely. So yeah, Tito maybe, Vanderlei, yeah, Sonnen, yeah, probably. Shamrock at a push, yeah, one of them, I suppose so. But I'd prefer if he didn't, for his own well-being. But he's a big lad. He can look after himself. Yeah, that's my take on it.
It's definitely an interesting time, Simon, with some of the elder statesmen of the sport. That's for sure.
Definitely not Vitor though. Vitor would kill him. Vitor, even post TRT, Vitor is still pretty active as a competitor, and he's still dangerous, and he'd still take out a lot of people outside the top 10 in the UFC without too much trouble. So I definitely wouldn't put him in there with him. That would be to quote a friend Luke Thomas, that would be promotional malpractice if they did that.
Can you imagine Vitor off the USADA program? First of all.
Oh, just don't. Let's just not even go there. Let's just
moving on
swiftly. Yeah.
Marcel Albecker tweets and says, "Is Baby Slice on the Bellator 179 main card? I've read conflicting reports." So,
according to the Bellator website, he is.
Right. So, it's a bit of a weird one. I actually haven't had a chance to get this confirmed, but from what I can see, it'll probably be the kind of the featured prelim. It looks like that the main card is going to be a 4-fight main card. I just can't. I get it. He's got the whole kind of link to his father and everything. But look, Kevin Ferguson Jr., a.k.a. Baby Slice, is 0-1. He had his very first pro fight last November. It didn't go his way. He lost via submission, guillotine choke, to Edward Colantes in the second round. Now, they matched him up with Darrell Griffin, or DJ Griffin, and he's making his pro MMA debut. I don't think that Bellator are gonna stick this fight on the main card. That's going to be kind of televised over in Spike, in the primetime slot, and then Channel 5 and Spike here in the UK, because it's just not going to be really high level MMA whatsoever. Now, I could be wrong. They may want to try and build Baby Slice's name up, and they may say, we'll make it a 5-fight main card, and we'll stick him on the kind of the primetime slot of the overall event. I'm not too sure, but I'd be surprised if they did that. So what we do know is that this was a very last-minute decision. I'm actually going to be interviewing Baby Slice this Thursday, so look out for my interview with him towards the back end of the week on MMA Junkie. And I actually am going to speak to him about when he took this fight, what kind of shape he was in, because for them to announce this fight just literally 2 weeks before the event is very, very short notice. So I'm kind of curious to find out whether Baby Slice was in camp or whether he was just literally called, at the 11th hour by Bellator to say, hey, look, your dad was supposed to main event the London show last year. Would love to have you, play some part of this card as an homage to him. And that's the reason he took it. These are all the questions that are unanswered at the moment, and I'm looking forward to kind of asking him when I see him on Thursday. But what are your thoughts, Simon, just on the fact that they did announce this fight on very short notice, and he's going to be a part of this event in a few weeks?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I mean, it's interesting that I actually think he will be on the main card, because that would be a very strange fight to headline the prelims with as well. I think, and also, of course, this isn't on pay-per-view in the States. This is going to be televised on Spike on a tape delay in the States. So
yeah.
So I think I tend to think that they will put it on the main card.
Okay.
Because he's Kimbo Slice's son. The prelims aren't going to be televised, so it makes sense to put him on the TV. They can tell the Kimbo story. They can, almost by way of a tribute to Kimbo, they can do that as part of the broadcast. So I suspect he will be on the main card. I suspect he will be the first man up, and then after that, you've obviously got the four more seasoned matchups there. You've got Chet Congo against Augusto Sakai. Liam McGeary, Linton Vassell at light heavy, Derek Anderson, Michael Page at welterweight rather, and Paul Daly versus Rory MacDonald in the main event. Yeah, I think that will be on the main card just because I think they'll put it on the TV. As for why they brought it in at short notice, I have no idea. Bobby Lashley was supposed to be on this card, but he isn't. So I don't know whether that might have had anything to do with it, whereby they looked to draft in Baby Slice. Although we got told a while back that Baby Slice was going to be on this card, didn't we? When they came over to London, Scott Coker told us this during the media scrum that he was going to be on the card. It just wasn't confirmed. So if Kevin Ferguson Jr. knew back then it's not really short notice to him. It's whether DJ Griffin has had any notice at all to prepare. But given that Coker told us in London, when was that? Early Feb, wasn't it? It was like the first week of Feb, I think. That Kimbo's son was going to be on the card. Then you would think that he's been prepping for the fight since then. So, I think he's probably had a decent enough run up. Whether DJ Griffin has or not, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I guess we're going to find out sooner rather than later where his placement on the card is going to be. You may well be right, Simon. He may be on the main card. I look back to his promotional debut, and they stuck him as the featured prelim. Right. That's why it makes me think that they'll probably put him back in that slot again. Yeah. But that was a 5-fight main card. This is currently a 4-fight main card, so they may bump him up, and it might be a 5-fight main card. We'll find out though in the coming days. Right. So Stuart Tuckwell says, after an unfortunate outcome at the weekend's Cage Warriors, will we now see Long versus Amusu title fight? And if so, does the winner end up in the UFC? And I'm going to double that up by another tweet that comes in from Cage Warriors play-by-play commentator Bradley Wharton, who says, how long before Lou gets a UFC call-up? So I didn't watch the Cage Warriors event on the weekend, Simon. I know you did. However, I did see Lou Long's spear, which caused the injury to Che Mills and got him a TKO victory. From the outside looking in, I haven't followed him too closely, but he's on a decent win streak right now. He's another Welsh fighter, which I'm sure the UFC would be, happy to utilize. Especially when they've got so many UK cards year on year now, it seems like. But, when it comes to somebody I do know very well, and that's Carla Musu, he should have been in the UFC a long, long, long time ago. So, if Lou Long's got to get through Amusu to A, win the championship, and then B, get into the UFC, he would have definitely earned it the hard way. But first of all, Si, why don't you kind of give our listeners and myself a little bit of a breakdown, some feedback, your review of the Cage Warriors event this past Saturday night, and then your thoughts on Lou Long and his future.
Yeah, Cage Warriors 83 it was. It was live on Fight Pass. You can watch all the Cage Warriors events live on Fight Pass these days, and it's on BT Sport as well. So the main card was on Fight Pass and BT Sport 2 in the UK. It was in Newport, Wales, and Wales is becoming a little bit of a hotbed of the sport. There's some real strong prospects coming out of Wales now. Obviously, we know Brett Johns is in the UFC, former Cage Warriors bantamweight champion. We know that Jack Marshman is in the UFC, former Cage Warriors middleweight champion. And we also know that John Phillips, who is also a former champion, is now in the UFC. So we've got 3 Welshmen in the UFC. And this is really the next generation coming up. We've got Jack Shaw look really good in his first in the first fight on the main card. Beat a Frenchman called Commonday. Just took him down and just wouldn't let him up. It was very impressive, really strong wrestling, and then going to his submissions and beating him with a belly down armbar. Really impressive stuff. Italian Giovanni Melillo. I'd never heard of him going into this fight. Took on Mohsen Bahari, who I have heard of. Bahari fought Carl Pendrid for the Cage Warriors welterweight title a couple of years back, 3 years back maybe. Norwegian, very seasoned, was expected to win this fight by many, and Melillo knocked him out in a round very, very impressively. He looks like one to watch, the Italian. Keep an eye out for him. Another Welsh guy to keep an eye on is Josh Reed, the crazy horse, bantamweight, defeated Gavin Kelly. I was expecting that fight to go go a fair distance because Kelly's a decent fighter as well. But Reed just absolutely went crazy on him and knocked him out with a huge flurry of punches against the fence in the first round. Then we had the true Viking, Soren Bug. If you get a chance to watch it on Fight Pass, this guy is a bit of a character. He came out looking like an extra from the Game of Thrones. He had a great big axe. I don't know how he got past security with his axe, but he had this whacking great axe. He had the fur over the shoulders. His cornermen were dressed the same. He was big old beard on the go, roaring at the crowd like a crazy person. And he went in there and won a unanimous decision. Absolutely dominated a veteran by the name of Scott Clist. 30-25, 30-25, 30-24. That's how dominant he was. Couldn't finish him though, and I guess that's the next thing. Can he get finishes? And the main event, Lewis the Foot Long, that is his fighting nickname, and it's brilliant. Against former UFC veteran, British welterweight veteran, Che Mills. And I think the plan for Lou Long was to get a really good performance under his belt, beat Che Mills and really make a statement and try and get onto the UFC's Glasgow card. That was always the plan for him, I think. And the fight lasted 18 seconds. Lou basically shot him for a takedown, run-of-the-mill takedown, landed the takedown. But I think in the act of levering Mills off the mat, Mills tweaked his knee. And I think he's done his MCL and his ACL all in one injury. So as soon as Mills hit the mat and Lou's on top of him, Mills was tapping furiously. And referee Mark Goddard stopped the fight. Now, some people on Twitter were confused because it was announced as a TKO. And, because Mills was tapping, they were going, well, we'd bet on Lewis Long to win by submission. Surely that's a submission because he was tapping. Well, no, it's not, because when there's an injury, if it's due to an injury, it's a TKO. And Mark Goddard was on Twitter explaining that on Sunday to a couple of fans who were a bit unsure of that. But yeah, Lou Long, he really, it was over before he could ever get started. Really, it was a good event. It was in the Newport Centre. There was a good, healthy crowd in, very vocal crowd. The Welsh fans are brilliant when it comes to supporting their own in all sports. But yeah, Lewis Long, he's got wins. I think he's 8-1 from his last 9. And I think Mills was the guy who I think if he could have got a big win against him, a guy who had fought in the UFC, that would have given him a platform to call for the shot in Glasgow. And you never know, he might have got it. But because of the way the fight went, it's hard to see whether they'll give him that chance now, because he hasn't been able to elevate his position from before the fight. So maybe they do the title fight with Carl Amasu. If Amasu isn't already signed by the UFC, as you say, Sandhu, he should be in the UFC now. He's someone who could slot in and be a very dangerous addition to the 170-pound division. So, I don't know. I feel sorry for Che Mills because he suffered a really bad injury. He's going to be out for a fair while. He's going to need some reconstructive surgery on that right leg. I think it was his right knee, before he can come back. And he's in the veteran stage of his career anyway. And then you got Lewis Long, who really wanted to make a statement and further his career. And even though he won, it wasn't in a way that is going to enhance his career at all. So it's a tough spot. It really is. And I don't know what's going to happen for him. If he doesn't get the call now, the best thing he can do is try and get a title fight. And if he can beat Carl Amasu, then he really is UFC ready. If Amasu leaves to join the UFC, then he should be calling for a shot at the vacant belt and should take on someone like Matt Inman, who is a seasoned operator who recently challenged Amasu. He fought Amasu for the vacant belt. So it's a tough one. It really is. I feel sorry for Mills because of the injury, and I feel sorry for Long because he hasn't been able to further his career. But as an event, mate, brilliant. Really good. And they've got an event coming up. I think June the 2nd is the next one in London at the Indigo at the O2, which is where, if you remember the Michael Bisping Anderson Silva weigh-ins, it's there. And they do the cage up on the stage. They have standing at the front. So it's a bit like being sort of behind the goal in a football match. So you've got all the crowd on the floor standing, and everyone upstairs is in the posh seats. And it's about 1,500 people in there, give or take. And the atmosphere in there was pretty raucous last time. So I'm expecting that to be another good one on June the 2nd. That'll be good fun. Nice one.
And you're going to be at Bama this weekend, aren't you, Si?
Yeah, I'm going to be at Bama. It's been a while since I've been at a Bama event. And I've got myself all booked up to make the trip up to Birmingham. I've been... Actually, one of the first MMA shows I covered, other sort of outside of London, I think it was the first, was Bama 7, which was in Birmingham. And went and covered that. And always get well looked after by the Bama guys. You know, I enjoy what they put on. Just as I enjoy them and Cage Warriors, they're very different in terms of how they put their shows on, and they look different on the TV. But while they are competing brands and they're very different, I enjoy both products. To be honest with you, Cage Warriors would appear to give a more straightforward route into the UFC, insofar as they're in partnership with the UFC. Well, they're in partnership with UFC Fight Pass at least, and they've got that clearly defined line straight in, and they've got so many fighters that have been through and made it. But Bama have built their reputation as well, and you think people like Mark Diakiese have been through the system and are now pulling up trees in the UFC. So that's going to be a fun night. I think we've got there's 4 title fights. It's a 4-fight main card, 4 title fights. What have we got? I'm just trying to find it. We are at Bama 29. It is. So the main event is a battle for the vacant heavyweight title. Former rugby player Brett McDermott, who always used to compete as a light heavy, he's now fighting at heavyweight against German Ruben Wolf for the vacant heavyweight belt. The middleweight fight in the co-main is going to be a cracker. Yannick Bahati versus Matt Hallam. That's a rematch, and that's going to be for the vacant Bama World Middleweight Championship. Really looking forward to that. There's a little bit of heat behind that rivalry. As I say, they fought before. Hallam was doing pretty well in that first fight, and then Bahati eventually took over and beat him. So big rematch there. We've got a lightweight title fight for the Lonsdale British lightweight title. Tim Barnett against Mario Said. And then opening up the main card is the welterweight British title between Terry Brazier and Walter Garhadza, who I've seen fight a couple of times. He's one to watch for sure. And of course, they've got an absolutely packed undercard as well. That'll be streamed. I think they stream that on Sport Bible. I think. Is Sport Bible? No, Unilad. They stream that on Unilad. And they have the main card is going to be on Dave. They've got a new TV deal, Sandhu. So they're going to be live on Dave on Friday night. I think I'm guessing it'll be about 8 or 9 p.m. Our friend Andy Shepherd will be hosting that with David Hay and Paddy Houlihan. So yeah, that'll be good fun. Looking forward to that.
That's good stuff. Simon Head on the regional local circuit here, covering local MMA. Love it. The final question comes from Graham Hughes, and he says, have the other middleweights got a case when it comes to the title being held up, considering the GSP Bisping fight isn't until November? So we've got a bit of an update here for you guys. Early this week, late last week, GSP put out a little video on social media essentially saying that he wasn't going to fight Michael Bisping until after October. Now, he's also, last week, spent some time at Madison Square Garden saying how much he'd love to fight in MSG. It sounds like, Simon, and it looks like, that the Bisping GSP fight is going to most probably take place in Madison Square Garden now, at that kind of similar, date and slot that the McGregor Alvarez fight took at the back end of last year. And if that happens, and if that's the case, then this would have been the longest period in the history of the UFC middleweight championship where it hasn't been defended for so long. So it's unfortunate. I get it. I get everyone's concerns. Obviously, this being the Brit Pack, where I suppose inadvertently happy for Michael Bisping to get his big payday, considering how much of the heavy water he's carried, not just for the UFC here in the UK, but just promoting the sport in general in the UK, and being that kind of brand ambassador and that British ambassador, being the first ever British champion. We've said this multiple times on the show, Simon. He deserves to kind of be able to finish his career and be comfortable financially, not only for himself but for his family as well. And this is his opportunity to get that financial security once and for all. Now, the question is in relation to all the other middleweights, and Anderson Silva had a big outburst on Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour show last week. Today, he posted on social media and said that he's going to be out of UFC 212 because the UFC wouldn't agree to him fighting Yoel Romero for an interim middleweight championship. You got Yoel Romero, who's obviously just biding his time, waiting to see how things develop between Bisping and GSP. Then you've got Gegard Mousasi, who I'm sure we're all pretty confident will re-sign with the UFC, but he's right up there as well. You could make a case for him getting a title shot, but it looks like a part of his negotiation is to try and get a main event slot on that Rotterdam card, which I think would make all the sense in the world. And then you got Luke Rockhold, who's obviously very peeved off himself. So you've got some angry and frustrated 185-pound fighters, Simon, who can't really do much about the situation. They can either fight to stay active, or they can sit back and let time pass by, but that can perhaps cause a bit of ring rust. And some of these guys, especially the likes of Yoel Romero, they aren't getting any younger. So I guess kind of going back to the question, can you sort of understand, or do, in your opinion, the middleweights have a strong case for being peeved off with this whole situation between GSP and Bisping?
Yeah, absolutely. And the issue here is we've got a guy coming back into the UFC. See, Michael Bisping agreed to fight Georges St. Pierre. That fight was agreed. And then they did a big press conference, didn't they, in Vegas, and announced the fight. They didn't give it a date. And now the fight has been announced. The goalposts seem to be moving. I think all common thinking at the time was that they were going to try and line this fight up for International Fight Week. And then it changed. And it was like, okay, it's likely to be September. Now we're talking November. And I think if the fight's International Fight Week, then I think you're within the bounds of a slightly longer than usual layoff, but you're still pretty much within the time frame. Once you get to September, you're stretching the patience of the other contenders. Once you get to November, you're taking the piss, I think. And I think that's where we're at right now. I think Michael Bisping is more than capable of defending this title between now and then. And the question is, should he? If you're honestly, I think Michael Bisping should be fighting in International Fight Week. And I think, but the Georges St. Pierre fight is such a big fight. But who's leading who here? Who's in charge here? Bisping's the champion, but Georges St. Pierre seems to be dictating terms in terms of when the fight's happening. So, I don't know. I mean, GSP is in some ways, he's played this very well. Because he's created the buzz about him coming back. When do you ever hear a press conference being held to announce a fight with no date and
Never.
No venue?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So they were so keen to get this out there, but what it's done, it has put all the cards in GSP's hand. Because if he says I'm not ready, he's not going to sign a fight. Bisping has basically committed himself to this fight now. Now, it's going to take one hell of a decision for Michael Bisping to say, well, screw you, I'll fight you in November if you're ready in November, but I need to defend my belt. That is one course of action he could take. I think from a business standpoint, I think his management would advise against that, because the big money fight is the Georges St. Pierre fight. And while Bisping did a fantastic job to beat Luke Rockhold and get the championship belt, you look at the people who he could potentially be fighting in International Fight Week, whether it's Yoel Romero, whether it's Rockhold again, whether it's Gegard Mousasi, they're all incredibly competitive, very, very difficult fights. And those fights could go either way. So it would be an enormous, enormous gamble on Bisping's part to now back out of the GSP fight as his next fight and take a fight in the interim. It causes one hell of a problem, and the person who has caused the problem, and Bisping gets a lot of flack, the person who's caused the problem is Georges St. Pierre. Because Bisping was all ready to fight, and GSP's the one moving the goalposts as far as I can make out. So if this is the fight that the UFC are committed to, then fine. They need to create an interim championship belt. They need to do it at International Fight Week, and they need to do Yoel Romero versus either Luke Rockhold, Robert Whittaker, or Gegard Mousasi. And then the winner of that fights the winner of GSP versus Bisping. And that's something that I also think is very important. If this GSP Bisping fight happens, as part of that fight contract, I think you need to lock in the fact that if GSP wins, he has to defend the belt. Otherwise, why bother? Do you know what I mean? You know, all this, everything has become an absolute mess with some of these championship belts, and we need to get back to brass tacks, and we need to get back to what this sport is about, and that is the best fighting the best, and the people holding the gold belts are the best fighters in the world because they've beaten the best guys. Bisping beat the number one guy in the world, Luke Rockhold, to win the belt. GSP really shouldn't be jumping into a middleweight title shot, in my opinion. The reason he is because he sells. And if I was Rockhold, if I was Whittaker, if I was Mousasi, yeah, I'd be pissed off. I'd be, you know, if it was happening in July, I'd be like, that's annoying, but I'm going to get my shot. I'm going to get my shot next. No one's going to fight for the belt until 2018. That's basically what we're saying. No one in the middleweight division in that list, you look at the middleweight top 15, no one whose name doesn't, you know, basically anyone who isn't Michael Bisping, no one from rank 1 to 15 is going to get in a middleweight title fight for the undisputed belt until 2018. That's not right. That's not right. And this needs dealing with. It really does. And I think GSP is he wants his cake and he wants to eat it as well, you know. And the UFC need the money, so I think they're bending for him. So that's my take.
That's the end of the questions, but I do want to end on this, Simon. Break out the red nappies. We want to give a big congratulations to Connor and Dee. Dee gave birth to a baby boy, a healthy baby boy, named Conor Jack McGregor, or Conor McGregor Jr., as he'll be better known as moving forward. And the happy couple and new parents didn't waste too much time in getting Conor McGregor Jr. set up with a verified and official Instagram account, which, as of this recording, already has, without any posts whatsoever, over 55,000 followers, which is absolutely remarkable. But I wanted to say, Simon, Conor McGregor's a father now, right? Yeah. You're a father of one. You've got your second one en route coming up sometime in the next kind of like 4 or 5, 6 weeks or so.
Yeah.
What is Conor going through right now? He's a couple of days into fatherhood. What's kind of going through his mind with his baby boy in his hands right now?
The best way to describe it is basically everything you learn in life as a man, right? As you're growing up, you learn just bits and pieces about living life, right? And you live your life by certain rules and timetabling, and you know that at certain times certain things happen and all the rest of it. The minute you have a baby, you can rip all of that up and throw it in the bin because it's absolute chaos. Your world turns upside down. You're running on very little sleep to start with, and it's adrenaline for most of it. And it's exhilarating, it's exciting, it's terrifying, but it's also brilliant. It's also brilliant, and I think what it will do, it will instantly give McGregor, and this isn't in any way saying that McGregor isn't a mature guy, because he is. He will very, very quickly establish another level of maturity that he never realised he had. And his focus will change. Every decision he makes about his fighting career, about his business ventures, any decision he makes now is going to have the family aspect in the back of his mind. Now, yeah, he had family before, but it's all different now. It is all different now, and it's, you know, it's something I've had, and it really, I never envisaged being a parent. I've got to be honest with you. When I was growing up, I never thought that I would ever be a dad, and I'm gonna have two. I'm gonna have two girls very soon. I've got one already. There's another one on the way, and yeah, it just changes everything. It changes absolutely everything. I'm delighted for him. I'm delighted for Dee. And I tweeted Conor, and I tweeted him saying he wasn't born to take part. He's here to take over. Enjoy it. Life will never be the same again, because it won't be. And I think we'll see. I think if anything, we might well see a more chilled out, reflective Conor McGregor maybe. In some of his interviews, he can get quite fired up and feisty. I think we might see an extra layer to him in the next few weeks and months. I hope so, because I think that's when we see the best of him, when he leaves some of the histrionics to one side and just talks normally. And I think we might see a bit more of that. But yeah, I wish him all the best. It's an amazing thing, and yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that does impact on his fighting career. Whether that really inspires him to go on and achieve even greater things in the sport, or whether it makes him sort of withdraw a little bit and say, do you know what, I've done incredibly well. Now I want to look after my family. So it's interesting to see how he goes from here. But yeah, I wish him all the best. It's a great thing. And also to his dad Tony, I know he's incredibly proud of his son. He's going to be walking around incredibly proud now as a grandparent again. So yeah, congrats to him as well.
Well, as advertised, as promoted, as promised, we couldn't keep it within 60 minutes. We couldn't keep it within an hour. And if you're still listening to our lovely, eloquent British voices, you know that we've gone well beyond an hour yet again. So appreciate everyone listening. But that's a wrap for another week, Simon.
Brilliant stuff. Episode number 38 of the Brit Pack, done and dusted. I reckon it's probably about 2 hours again. Thank you so much for listening. You can get us on Twitter at Sandhu MMA, at Simon Head, at the Brit Pack MMA. Most importantly, send us your questions anytime, day or night. Our Twitter is open for business. Tweet us the questions. We'll keep track of those, and we will do our best to answer the best ones on the show each week. Go to the website, thebritpackmma.com. You will find every show we've ever done. So if you want to go back and listen to just how terrible we were on show 1, you can do that. And you can check out a few other bits and pieces. We will endeavour to get our pre-fight picks up on the blog this week as well. You can get us on, I don't think we call it Apple, it's Apple Podcast now, I think they call it, rather than iTunes. Apple Podcast, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Acast, YouTube, anywhere you can find a half decent podcast. Hopefully you will find Brit Pack knocking around there somewhere as well. Thank you to everyone for listening. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night. Tweet us your picks, don't forget, your 5-fight main card, and we will speak to you next week.